In this lesson, let's talk about looks. Now, we've done a lot of technical discussion up till this point, so I thought we'd have a little bit of fun in the next few lessons, create some different looks for you to use in your productions. Now, what I'm going to do is add a couple of extra nodes here. As we know with the last node in the chain, that will always be for our curve. Let's add our log C to Rec 709 lookup table. I just want to remind you that even though it looks like the exposure adjustment is happening after the LUT, it actually happens prior to the LUT. That means we can be quite aggressive when working with the exposure without losing the details and clipping the blacks. This is because the majority of the exposure will affect only the straight line portion of our S curve and not the blacks and whites, as they'll be rolled off in either direction. The same principle applies to the color corrections we do here on the first node. When we dial in the colors, we'll watch it through the curve and it will mostly affect the midtones and not affect the black and whites that much. Alright, so keep that in mind as well. Now what I'm going to do just for right now is I'm just going to reset our offsets, our exposure, and I'm going to get to that at the very end and you'll see why. I'm going to select my second node. And just that we get a little bit more enhancement in the colors, what I'm going to do is just cut the saturation value down to about 20. So that's basically cutting it about 60%. Because we will do our primary color corrections prior to the desaturation node, the colors will be filtered through this node the same way as all the corrections will be filtered through our last node in the chain. Dialing the colors through the combination of both the desaturation filter and the lookup table will give us both access to the low saturation colors of the color palette and most impact the midtones of the shot. With our first node here selected, we're going to do a little technique that's referred to as bouncing. Now, it's a little bit easier to do if I had a control surface in front of me, but just because of desk real estate and obviously the clicking and clanging of actually working with a surface is a little bit loud for my recording, so that's why I've been using a mouse up until this point. But basically the way that bouncing works is you're going to come in and you're going to take your control surface, or your mouse for that matter, and you're basically going to be going off in different directions with either the lift or the gamma to get the look that you want. So for example, with our lookup table here selected, we know that we're going to need to affect the yellow and the blue of the lift and the gamma. Now, it's up to you to decide how you want to start going to figure out the look that you want to get. But what we're going to do is take our lift and we're going to send it over towards blue. We're going to take our gamma, we're going to send it over towards yellow, and the blue and the yellow combination will give us a green combination. All right. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to start basically dragging like this. Okay, little bits and little bits. Now you can see why this is a little bit easier if you're working with a surface here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep clicking this over here just a little bit. I'm going to get it over here roughly about there. We'll just bounce this over a little bit, maybe to about here. And I think we're almost good where we've got it right about there. I think that's not too bad. All right, it's looking a little bit green. Not as green as I would like it to look, but it's pretty close. So the question now is, how do I get it even closer? Well, this is where the exposure comes into play. And the reason I wanted to throw exposure in here last is because the exposure is really what's going to determine how much mood we're going to be adding to this shot. That's sort of the best way that I can put it. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to come back to that last node in the chain, and I'm going to grab the exposure under the offset. I'm just going to start dragging it south. And you'll notice now that we definitely get a different feeling as we bring the shot darker, right to about there. Normally you would want to dial in the exposure first, as explained earlier in the course, but for demonstrating the impact exposure has on the color, we'll do it the other way this time. Now, there's something that's important to keep in mind when you're doing a technique like this. Now, I've applied this to I'm going to call this to a close-up. I'm going to right-click, and we're just going to grab a still of this so we can take a look at it on some other shots. I'm just going to switch back to seeing all the clips. Now I'm going to jump down to the wide shot of our office because that really is what's going to determine if this look needs any adjustments, like maybe the exposure needs to be brought up, maybe in a little bit more green or a little bit yellow needs to be added. But this is where we can easily tell if this look is working, and it definitely is working, and it definitely gives our shot a very different cold feel than it had when we started. This setup can be used for a variety of different looks and moods, and it's up to you to dial in the right amount of each color and find the combinations that fit the story and your tastes. Keep in mind that adjusting the amount of saturation that you run the colors through will give you access to a new set of color combinations. I also encourage you to combine this setup with the print curve from one of the first contrast management lessons and create some unique looks of your own.